Good morning, and welcome to our webcast congregation that may be here. Still got some out of town. Brother Jamie's supposed to make it back for church today. He told me Wednesday night he was going to do that. I appreciate him doing that. And we got some company coming today. Brother Johnny and Sister Jeanette Collins are here. We had a big birthday for Becca yesterday. Belated. So, yeah. So, we have any prayer requests? Yes. That's right. Sister Joy Jones. All right. Diane, would you pray for us?
Worship you this morning, dear Father. We're thankful for each one that's here, those that are on the internet. We're thankful, dear Father, for the love that binds us all together. We are so appreciative of that bond and how it helps strengthen us to have our brothers and sisters to help us along the way. We ask, dear Father, that you bless my friend Lisa and Sister Joy. Medical issues that we're asking you to keep your arm of love and protection around about them. We know that there's many others that are facing different things in life, those that have recently lost loved ones and many other issues. And you're the only one that knows all about it and what is needed in each situation. So we ask that you be with each one. Be in our Sunday school this morning, dear Father, as we read your word. Be in our service this morning as we praise you, and we'll be thankful and give you all the praise. Amen.
We're in the 10th chapter of Acts from 2 weeks ago. And Brian got started in this. We were in Raleigh when y'all started this. The timing of this story is interesting to me. When we started here in 2006, I think it's safe to say, Sister Faye, we started with a bang, didn't we? Opening weekend, and then for months and months after, the excitement we had that the people coming from the campground every weekend and just what was happening, the news was getting out in the community here, and that, then we had folks like Mike and Chrissy move and different ones that came to be. Tom and Nancy moved a year later, and they moved 2 years later, and things were good, and then you go along and the new wears off and reality kind of kicks in a little bit. And this story, when you read the book of Acts, the action book, the Acts of the Apostles, I've always loved that because I'm an action guy. It doesn't seem like it's that long after the day of Pentecost that we're reading about Cornelius. But in fact, it was 9 years later. AD 30 was when Jesus was crucified, resurrected. When the day of Pentecost happened was the year AD 30. 5 years later, Paul was on the road to Emmaus and had his conversion in AD 35. This was about 4 years after that, and it fulfilled what Jesus had said to his disciples as he was getting ready to depart, that you'll be witnesses of me in Jerusalem, that was day of Pentecost, in Judea, in Samaria, and now story is the uttermost parts of the earth. It's already happened. We had read in chapter 8 about Philip going down to Samaria. So just in a progressive order. And now it's going to the Gentiles. It's going to an Italian man. He knew about pizza and all the things that go with, well, he did. He was Italian. He might have owned a pizza shop. You don't know. I'm not being racist. That's very light. I mean, they had that back then. So an Italian man, it's going to somebody that, and when I say that for a reason. It's not to be funny. It's that this is about as far removed from the umbrella of the Jewish people that you can get. They would consider an Italian just a reject, outcast. But here God's and he's showing by example how we all ought to be when things are different than what our comfort zone is. Easy to say and not so easy. And we'll just start reading there because I don't think there's a need to rehash that. Y'all are Bible readers, you know the story. I guess maybe we'll back up to the 9th verse. That's kind of the beginning of this passage. And that's not bad to back up to there. Peter sees this vision with these 4-footed beasts. I'll just encapsulate it. And wild beasts and things that were not kosher by the law. Who's got the mic? Brian? All right, Brian, start reading in verse 13 is, I think, the place to start reading.
And there came a voice to him, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." But Peter said, "Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean." And the voice spake unto him again the second time, "What God hath cleansed, that call thou not uncommon. That call not thou common." This was done thrice, and the vessel was received up again into heaven. Now while Peter doubted in himself what vision which he had seen should mean, behold, the men which were sent from Cornelius had made inquiry for Simon's house, and stood before the gate, and called, and asked whether Simon, which was surnamed Peter, were lodged there. While Peter thought on the vision, the Spirit said unto him, "Behold, 3 men seek thee. Arise, therefore, and get thee down, and go with them, doubting nothing, for I have sent them." Then Peter went down to the men which were sent to him from Cornelius, and said, "Behold, I am he whom you seek. What is the cause wherefore you are come?" And they said, "Cornelius the centurion, a just man, and one that feareth God, and of a good report among all nation of the Jews, was warned from God by an holy angel to send for thee into his house and to hear words of thee."
What's interesting, really interesting to me, is that you've almost got 3 parts of the Trinity working so far in this story. An angel of God spoke to Cornelius. Peter heard a voice. Whose voice was it? And then, Brian just read, the Spirit in verse 19, capitalized S. The Spirit said unto him. So that's always fascinating to me, is that angels were working on behalf of God and angels spoke. I don't know why it didn't say that the Spirit spoke to Cornelius, or that he heard a voice, but it was an angel was doing God's bidding. I don't know. That's part of the blend of the Trinity there. These 3 are one, and the angels are in there subservient to, but working for, and it's all God's. We hear people, a lot of times you'll hear people say, "Well, the Lord told me," or "I felt like God wanted me to do this." Well, it could have been angels speaking to you. I don't know how to differentiate that in my spirit, but it's all on behalf of God. And I think that's pretty cool. So we don't always get answers that we want when we want, do we? I think it would be cool if every time I had something going on that I was confused about, that I didn't know about, we always want to know answers. That's one reason gossip is so popular. Gossip is answers. You think about it, it's knowledge. Somebody, well, I heard Mary did so-and-so. Well, then you got the answer. It might not be the true answer because it's gossip. But it somehow satisfies something inside of us to get answers. And how many times do we have things come up that we don't have answers to? And we wish we did. If we could put a quarter in a machine, we'd do it. And here, in this case, like as soon as Peter has this conversation with God, he's had this vision, he heard this voice, he's doubting in himself, he's thinking about, and boom, a voice speaks and says, there's somebody down at the gate. Man, that's a lot to take in at one time. I don't know, his mind had to be reeling, seriously. Where for me, I have to go, I don't hear God speak to me. I don't hear an audible voice. I don't know if you do. He had a walkie-talkie in his pocket. My goodness. Diane's smiling because she remembers vividly. Wow, that was amazing. And I never doubted it. I mean, that was Chuck's thing, but it wasn't mine. I have feelings that I try to pray about and go by. I don't get a voice. I remember when Brian and I come down the first day here, and we rode around with Bobby for 3 or 4 hours, ate lunch together. We're looking at different places we could possibly have a meeting at. And we took Bobby back to Sylvester. And then Brian and I said, Brian, I want to go back and look, before we go back to Atlanta, before we go back home. And we went, remember we stopped at Holiday Inn, and that didn't feel right. And we went to that motel that was brand new, right there at the foot of the bridge. And when we got ready to pull, and that didn't feel right. And we got ready to pull out, and we saw that church at the end of that Kensington Court. And we saw the fence. And I can't, to this day, describe the feeling I had. And that feeling I know now was right. And I'm not saying that in a boastful manner. I'm saying it in a thankful manner that I was able to recognize, because we did climb the fence and trespass, and we ended up Bible studying. But all of that led to this. If we had not followed that, we would have never found out. Feelings are sometimes all we have to go on. I don't hear God say, rise and go. I don't get that. And sometimes my feelings aren't correct. I think it's right, and boy, I've made plenty of mistakes with that.
Try the spirits.
Huh?
Right.
Try the spirits.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you do the best you can with the right intent, but yeah, we don't always know the right answer.
The thing about listening to the voice of God is that we can easily misinterpret what we think to be his words or his direction, and it's really coming from us. It's really my own wants and desires and all that. And I remember I was talking with someone one time, and they said, I feel like God is leading me to do such and such. And they were just emphatic that God was in what they were getting ready to do. But it was It was contrary to the Bible.
Yeah, there's your tip right there.
It was complete. I mean, there was specific scripture against what they were going to do. And that was a wake-up call for me. I really felt like that God opened my mind to that piece of truth. I am not going to contradict myself. I'm not going to tell you to do something that contradicts the Word of God. He is consistent. He is the same. And so that is how we help discern, is by measuring against the Word.
Yeah, and sometimes we do things and we feel like it's the right thing to do, and we don't really, you step out in faith, and the answer is not always immediately obvious, but time is the great revealer, and time is what proves all things.
Right.
And so it may be a while after we make a decision that we get a confirmation. And then things will happen and you go, thankfully we did the right thing, you know. It is scary. It is scary in some ways, because, but Peter did have direction. God was not wanting anything to be left uncertain in this story, because there was a very specific reason to go to the Gentiles. That was really the purpose of everything from the beginning, was that the Word of God and the Spirit of God be available to all mankind, to everybody.
Right.
And you would think after the day of Pentecost that maybe next week it would have gone to the Gentiles, but there's like a phasing in period. God had to do, I don't know why he did it like he did, but that's what he did. But now this is important. This story sets the tone for really a lot of the rest of the book of Acts.
And he had been preparing Peter, because Peter had been staying with this Simon the tanner, which Jews weren't supposed to be around tanners. That was, against that. And then in the 23rd verse, this always makes me chuckle. It says he called them in and lodged them. So Peter is staying in the house with a tanner and 3 Gentiles.
He's such
God
violation.
Such
violation.
Right, but God really is, he had kind of been preparing him up until this point, and now he's really blowing the doors of Peter's mind.
Yeah, Peter had all the training. And we don't do good with this. I talked to someone in another crowd recently, and I told them that we do really good when we're preaching to white folks that are middle class and above. That's our comfort zone in our church. Every church we got. And if you get down in the lower social economic parts of our society, we're not really comfortable with that. It was funny. We said we want to take the gospel to the whole world.
As long as.
No, we don't. We want the gospel to go to the whole world, but we don't want to do it. Let's be honest about it. Sorry if that offends you, but I'm being honest. I can say this at camp meeting and get in trouble, but it's true. We don't want to take the gospel to the whole world. We want the gospel to go out, but we want somebody else to do the dirty work. We want it to go to where we're comfortable, where we don't have to get our hands real dirty. You switch economic class and we're a little out of our comfort zone. You switch race and we get real weird real quick. I wish our whole congregation was here for that. And it's not right. It's not right. Because in Peter's mind, going to the Gentiles was preaching to a different race, even though their skin color may have matched or been close. It was just as stark a difference to him as preaching to black folk or preaching to Asians or any other minority would be to us here in southern USA. And yet he heard God, and he never blinks in this story. He never says, wait a minute, what are you doing? Because God's saying, leave your house and go with these strangers. And he did it. He didn't question God. Wow, I don't know, I can't emphasize how big that is. All right, pass the mic, Brian. Sister Faye, you'll pick up in verse 23.
Then called he them in and lodged them. And on the morrow Peter went away with them, and certain brethren from Joppa accompanied him. And the morrow after they entered into Caesarea, and Cornelius waited for them, and had called together his kinsmen and near friends. And as Peter was coming in, Cornelius met him and fell down at his feet and worshipped him. But Peter took him up, saying, Stand up, I myself also am a man. And as he talked with him, he went in and found many that were come together.
Let's stop right there for a second. Does it say in here, I've got in my mind that there were 3 men from Cornelius. I'm trying to find where it says that. I'm not sure it does. Yes, it does. In verse 7, verse 7 says there were 3 men. Now, if you go to the 11th chapter, the next chapter, and the 12th verse, there's 6 brethren. Sister Faye, you read in verse 23 that certain brethren from Joppa accompanied him. There were 6 brothers that he took with him, which is scriptural. In the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall every word be established. You want, whenever there's anything of consequence going on, you want witnesses to be there, good or bad. I got called into someone wanting to have a talk with me in the last year. We were at the campground, and it was obvious they were not happy with me. They wanted to have a talk with me. I took my wife as a witness. That was protection. You want witnesses, but when good things happen, you want witnesses. And he had 6 brethren from Joppa that come with him. And so Cornelius had called together his kinsmen and his near friends, people that he loved. And he had never met Peter, he had never seen Peter, and he falls down to worship him, which I'm sure felt silly to Peter. Peter's like, no, we're not doing that. Let's don't do that. All right. So let's pick up in verse 28.
And he said unto them, Ye know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or to come into one of another nation. But God has showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. Therefore came I unto you without gainsaying, as soon as I was sent for. I asked therefore for what intent ye have sent for me. And Cornelius said, 4 days ago I was fasting until this hour, and at the 9th hour I prayed in my house, and behold, a man stood before me in bright clothing, and said, Cornelius, thy prayers are heard, and thine alms are had in remembrance of the sight of God. Send therefore to Joppa, and call hither Simon, whose surname is Peter. He is lodged in the house of one Simon a tanner by the seaside, who when he cometh shall speak unto thee. Immediately therefore I sent to thee, and thou hast well done that thou art come. Now therefore are we all here present before God to hear all things that are commanded thee of God.
All right. Wow, this is this is an intense 4-day period. Good morning, y'all. We're in the 10th chapter of the book of Acts. And I don't know. No, it's not going to work. I don't know how far. I don't know how far it was from Caesarea to Joppa. Evidently, close enough they could make it in a day by foot. So you had Cornelius having his vision, where God spoke to him on day 1. He sends servants to Peter on day 2. They spend the night. They come back on day 3, and he says, 4 days ago. So this has been an intense period of time for Cornelius, that trying to reconcile, and the journey from Joppa, where Peter was, back to Caesarea was long enough that Peter got the vision clear in his mind. He didn't understand it at first. He did not understand it, because it said in verse 17, now while Peter doubted in himself what the vision which he had seen should mean, but he had that night to think about it, and then that next, and I know he was praying, God, reveal this to me. And then on the journey the next day, and now when he sees Cornelius and walks in the door,
It's about 40 miles.
about how long?
40 miles.
40 miles. That's getting it. The average person walking, your walking pace is about 4 miles an hour. Did you know that? It takes about, if you're just strolling, it takes about 15 minutes to do a mile. Just ballpark. And so, 10 hours not counting lunch. I hope they ate lunch somewhere along the way. That's a long way. 40 miles. That's about, well, from here to Tifton's probably about 45 miles. What would you do, Sister Faye, if they said, you need to walk to Tifton? I mean, just do 40 miles from somewhere in your house in Raleigh. They said you need to go walk there. Wow, seriously, that's a long ways. Well, he had time to think. And now when he walks in the door, and he immediately says, Peter was, he understood the vision at that point, because he said, if I can find it here. He said in verse 28, you know it's unlawful for a man that's a Jew to keep company with or come unto one of another nation. But God has showed me, he had his answer, that I should not call any man common or unclean. I'll confess I still got work to do on that. I don't know about anybody else. But we pretty much, most of us, we got in our mind, it's easy to judge other people, let me put it that way. It's easy to judge other people. I have watched with interest, now with these webcasts, we get to peek in each other's windows. And I have watched with interest Brother Matt Collins' mission on Sunday mornings. And I've watched with interest the reaction of some of our folks to poor folks from a minority background filling the bench, saying verses. And some folks, and I'm on the webcast, and I hope I don't hurt anybody's feelings, but it's interesting to see the reaction. Some of our folks are very much this way, seem like they don't have a problem. And I could tell some folks are a little bit not that way. And I don't see that in judgment, because I think most people have room for improvement with this. We like to do this with the circle that we love and are close to. And when it's different, we're all a little weird and draw back in our corner. I mean, that's human nature.
God loves to get us out of our comfort zone. He sent the disciples out without him for the first time, and they were out of their comfort zone because he was not with them to heal and to deal with the people. And the disciples, the apostles now are severely out of their comfort zone in so many ways. Jesus was not there. They're having to go by the leading of the Spirit. And, when we are led to work in our communities, God is going to break our comfort zone apart. It is, we are insulated in a lot of ways from so many evils of life. And those things are uncomfortable to deal with. The realities that other people face. But it always, every time when we say yes to the calling of God, every time he responds with the provision on how to do what he's asked us to do. Just like he's done with Matt. That wasn't comfortable probably the first time Matt ever walked in a jail cell or walked in, a community that he wasn't around, but it's God provided. And look what he's done. One thing that is interesting about, if someone called me from a city 10 hours away to come pray with them, I'm not going to start walking, but a 10-hour drive would be just as uncomfortable for me as a 10-hour walk might have been for Peter. It's out of the way. It's not convenient. And would I jump up and go?
You can make Norfolk in about 10 hours.
You make it to Norfolk. So if somebody decided they wanted to get sanctified in Norfolk, am I going to jump up and drive from Albany, Georgia, or am I going to call somebody in Norfolk and say, can you stop by their house?
Be like,
Hey,
Kenneth, I need to talk to you, bro.
That's not around the corner.
Let me say something about which visual you were talking about in the mornings in Raleigh. 'Cause
If you don't mind using the mic, the webcast can hear you.
I'm not as close to our adopt a block as certainly Matt and Chip and Shelley
Right.
but we've been involved with it, and
Sure.
I can tell you what you think you're seeing is not. The church has fully embraced
That's great.
that process.
That's great.
And it has helped us as much as it has helped now. How
Oh,
many of those
absolutely.
young people are gonna, we don't know, but they are really, what Matt's been able to do is, bring a lot of people together, bring our church together, and the outside group that provided the impetus for it. We've kind of been involved with them, and it is interesting when you don't always. The others will say they'll cover for you. They, it's your baby. You got it. Right. You roll with it. But it has been to our benefit, and they do. Those people are. I tell you, it's not an environment we're used to.
No.
The love
None of
that we
us.
were talking about last night at the party, the love that we see among our folks, and I'm a product of the love of our folks.
Right?
I clearly am. There are times of, I was hanging on by a thread, could have went another way, but the determination and the consistency of our folks always shone through. So it's they. The funny thing is, you can just see it when they if we eat after church, it's not just the food. They just love the fellowship and that kind of thing. And you really want to talk too about a comfort thing. Matt signed up for the prison program. And I went with him just simply because I wanted to go with him. And let me tell you, that is a real experience.
Get out of your comfort
When you're
zone.
sitting in there with the death row crowd. I don't want to know what the reasons all those guys were in there for.
I guess not.
But and I'll tell you, the first thing it affected me when I went with him the first time is you go in and they pat you down, and you got to be certified and all that first. They do a thing on you, Matt obviously had a track record. He'd already done it, so they knew him there and that kind of thing. But I counted, we went in, this is Central Prison in Raleigh. We went through 5 heavily locked doors. And when we went through each barrier, and the cling, 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 bam, cling, 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 bam, I look back. If I have to get out of here,
Don't lose those keys.
No, man, it's different, but there are people. I'm thankful that he's not the only one working, and now COVID has completely wiped all that out. So I don't know where that's going, but I only mention that is because Brian, what he said about comfort zone. Man,
You was way out of your comfort zone.
I was so far out of my
Yeah.
comfort zone.
Yeah.
And
That's not the kind of people you deal with on a daily basis.
yeah, but there were guys in there that sort of organized and no question trying to do the right thing. And so on one hand you're challenged, but on the other hand there are parts that are very inspirational.
Yeah.
Very inspirational.
You want to say something? Yeah. Well, and Matt's work has changed y'all in Raleigh, but there's been ripple effects outside of Raleigh to our other crowds too, and I appreciate that. I think there's other people that their eyes have kind of opened. And this story, to me, and we talked about this before you guys got here, I'll say it again. We say there, we want to take the gospel to the world, and it's not true. It's not a true statement. We want the gospel to go to the world, but we don't want to take it to the whole world. We want to take it to white, middle class, and up people. Because that's where we're comfortable. And Matt's crashed all those barriers down for us, and that is to our benefit. And it's hard for us to relate in this story. I don't think we really understand. We try to, but we can't really fully understand the training that Peter had not to deal with people from other countries. This is just maybe even more so of breaking barriers down than it is for us to have minority black folks come in with us. More of an our fault. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody else.
Because we sing when we all get to heaven, and we don't believe that.
Yeah, well, you're going to get there another time. I'll get there.
We believe we're all going to go to heaven, but we're not sure about y'all.
Right.
Well, it's also a factor that he was an unlearned, uneducated fisherman.
He was.
He
He was.
And he's going out to a centurion here, a high up,
Yeah.
and God doesn't look at status. He doesn't look at status and where we are in our education or
Right.
anything like that. He's looking at the spirit on the inside and what he can do with us to further his gospel. And that's hard for us to comprehend and all. But when I think about how God used these disciples in the day that they were in, and they just weren't learned men. They were just full of the Spirit. That's my desire. Yeah. That's my desire.
Sister Faye, you remember when we've been here 4 or 5 years, you remember us going over to, I think it was 3rd Avenue and having a meeting in a black church over there? Saturday night, they were having an anniversary service, and the old church it's broke up since then, but they were having their 3rd anniversary service, and the preacher there and I had met each other at a prayer meeting, an interfaith prayer meeting, and he had asked me to come. He had all white preachers that weekend because they were having the opposite issue over there in Blacktown, and I don't mean that in a derogatory manner, but it was an old converted house. They converted it into a church, a little shotgun house. And he was trying to break out of their race barrier. And he had a guy named Johnny White from Philema Road Baptist preached on Sunday night. Me and Dylan Welch went to that meeting. And I preached on Saturday night, and there was about 25 of us that went. Back when we were healthy. Brian was there, and Johnny and Carolyn, I believe, were there. I know Brother Johnny was. Remember that vividly. And it was a mixture of, he was, right? And it was a mixture of white and black. There was about 25 of them. There was about 25 of us. They sang for us, and it was cool. It was really cool. It only happened that one time. That preacher, Marcus Mathis, I've heard went to Americus, and I can't trace him. I can't find him. I've been trying to. Anyway, back to this story. So Cornelius, what Diane just read, that Cornelius is telling his story, and I think the greatest thing was the verse 31, that the spirit that spoke to him was the angel of God, it said in the earlier part. But for any of us to hear that your prayer is heard, oh my goodness. How many things have you prayed for, you hadn't got an answer to, and you find out that your prayer was heard? Reminds me of over there in Daniel, when Daniel was praying and praying and praying, and he got no answer, and he got no answer, and finally the angel showed up and said, the Lord heard you.
First time.
But I got delayed. I was in a fight with the prince of Syria, and I got here as quick as I could. I don't understand that, because they're supposedly, in the Revelation, the angels were 10,000 times 10,000, and if you have a calculator, that's 100 million, and thousands of thousands. So I don't understand why Daniel had to wait. If that one guy got delayed, it seemed like there was some reserves. I don't understand all that. These are things I think about, but I don't have the answer to. But to hear that your prayer is heard, wow, that's all we want, is God to hear our prayer, whatever our prayer is. And what Daniel, the example in Daniel is that our prayer is heard. We don't get the instant answer we always want. Because we always want instant. Everything instant. We live in an instant world, don't we? Everything's instant.
It's true.
And in the kingdom of God, things in the fullness of time was come. God sent forth His Son, not 1 second before. And there's a fullness of time for us in the seasons of our life.
That's true.
And it's only going to happen on God's timing.
Gary, I haven't been with you through the reading of this, but there's another place in Galatians where, and I've been looking for it, I can't find it, where Paul has to, it wasn't just Peter's uneducated, but his conformance to the Jewish law, circumcision and uncircumcision. So he was still rooted in, we do things this way, right. You do things. But in fact, Paul even called him out. I wish I could find it. Here it is. Galatians 2 in the 14th verse, he said, but when I saw that they walked not uprightly according to the truth of the gospel, I said unto Peter, and this Paul's, he's punching out Peter.
That's where they got him.
And I'm like, whoa. Yeah. And he says, before them manner of Gentiles, and not, he says, well, I'm marking up. Peter, before them all, if thou being a Jew, livest after the manner of Gentiles, you want to live after the manner of Gentiles, and not as do the Jews, why compellest thou the Gentiles to live as a Jew? He said, you're taking on,
Basically, it's,
you're taking on their stuff, but you know, that's not a problem. But now you want them to make, before you give them your A-OK, you want.
yeah.
So he said, wait a minute, you can't have it both ways.
That early church was having to work because,
Growing pains.
Exactly.
you know, we've had a lot of that here, especially in the beginning. Man, great day. We had a lot that I had to take in that I wasn't used to in other congregations. Manners of dress and behavior and background, and it's, man.
And when they come in with a different background, that they're not rooted in doctrine, but also in our tradition. Let's just be honest. You can't let them get up from the altar and just begin to whip them into shape, because you run the risk of offending the little one and running them off. And we still have things that.
Well, we do that. There's two things that bother me terribly at altar service. I mean, terribly. One is somebody gets up and comes to the altar, and our initial reaction is, wow, great, start a song, woo, and we won't let them pray. They came up here to talk to us? No. And I think people's hearts are in the right place. I know that their intent is good, but they didn't come up here to hear your advice. They could have heard that last night. They came up here to pray. Let them pray. Don't knock the phone off the hook. That drives me nuts. Let them pray. Now, if they're down there for 10 minutes and they're seemingly bogged down, maybe, but we go talk to them within 30 seconds. They hadn't even almost said, "Dear Lord," and we're talking to them. That bothers me. The other thing, they get up and they say they're sanctified, and we want to give them 50 years of our learning in 3 minutes. We want to tell them all the things they need to go do. Just let them breathe. It'll be okay. They got sanctified. We got plenty of time to work with them. They're not going to lose out in the next hour. I guarantee you. We don't have to give it to them right now. And it's good intent, but it's like, people, really, let's trust God. When they're down here praying, trust God. God's already worked with their heart. He's got them to the altar. Even though it's my son, my grandson, I don't have to go down there and say a word. Let God deal with them. I mean that. Wow, I didn't know I was going to say that this morning. It seems like it's I don't know, it probably hadn't gotten worse, but it seems maybe I've been noticing it more. Let them pray. Just trust God for the process. If they're at the altar and if they just got sanctified or they're praying, God's got them. I guarantee you, if they're down there, He's got them. Let Him do His work.